Hey, how's it going, guys? This is Colin with Worthy Brand Consulting. And today, I just want to real quick give you something that I think will really help you in your business. And that something is an amazing book. I would 1000% you suggest you go get it. It's called Built to Last by Jim Collins. For some of you, you've probably already read this book. I literally have a box over in the corner of the room for my wife and I's local photography business we run. We work with just business owners and entrepreneurs that are kind of looking to brand themselves. So we literally have a box of like 25 or 30, and we just give these out because it's a game changer. And why do I say that? So this book, Built to Last, was written by a guy named Jim Collins, and him and a bunch of other really smart folks studied businesses in the U.S. that have been around for longer than 100 years, which is very few. And they tried to figure out like what are the things that allows a business to be around for 100 years, right? So for some of you, you've probably never even thought that concept, like the current business you're in. I know for me, it's only a recent thought I've had is, how do I build a business that lasts 100 years? Well, that business, in order for it to last past 100 years, it has to continue to run, obviously, when you're no longer here. For, well, I should say for some of you, for most of you, but for some of you, you may last over 100 years. It's that's great. You'd have to start it when you're 1 year old. But anyway, beside the point. The whole book just talks about that concept. How does a business last 100 years? And one of the main things Jim mentions is the companies that have been around for that long. One of the main focuses of the company is having a core purpose, and it's different from what you think. So a lot of you are probably familiar with, companies have like core values and core focuses, and it's on their walls, and maybe it's written in some document somewhere. But the companies that last a really long time are obsessed with their core purpose. They recognize their reason for being in business. And here's the thing: their core purpose is not necessarily the thing they do. So, for instance, if the business is a real estate, syndication company, or let's just go with that, the thing they do is buy real estate and house people, right? That's the thing they do, but their core purpose could be completely different, right? It could be, an absolute, maybe their core purpose is just to be a light to human beings, and everything they do revolves around being a light, being just a total blessing to people. And they could do it through real estate. They could do it through anything. And so let me give you an example. So Marriott, right? We're all very familiar with Marriott. One of the things Jim Collins talks about is for Marriott, the founder of Marriott, I totally forget his first name. It's like Bill Marriott or something like that. But he started a root beer stand in like 1907 or something, the very early 1900s, right? So he sold root beer, okay? But one of the things he was obsessed with was serving people and doing it so well, obsessing to the point of just like being, just almost crazy about wanting to serve people well. So his core purpose of being in business was creating such an amazing customer experience, right? So fast forward a whole bunch of years, and his son and future generations, they end up getting into the hotel business, right? That we now understand as Marriott Hotels, right? And the reason that the original founder who started a root beer stand, the reason his business continued to last was because he had a really, really strong core purpose. He had a reason that they were doing business beside the actual mechanism of what they did. And that was the thing that kept them going. Another example is 3M. So a lot of you are familiar with sticky notes. I'm going to take a quick sip of coffee here. Obviously, any of you who have used sticky notes before, I'd probably say 95% of it comes from 3M. Okay, so now you're probably familiar with 3M. But the truth is, 3M actually started off as like a mining business. Okay, that's what Jim talks about. They owned a whole bunch of mines. I think this was also in the early 1900s, and they were failing. It was a failing business, okay? But one of the early core purposes that they soon established was experimentation, something they haven't been doing. They were in the mining business, and they followed the common thread that most people talk about, which is find your niche down, stick with it, become the best at that one thing. And there is something to be said for that. But the truth is, for 3M, they followed that classic model and they were failing, right? So they quickly adopted a core purpose of, we are here to solve problems, and we're here to solve a lot of problems, and we're here to experiment. So they quickly changed their core purpose of the business to one of where we want to solve as many general customer problems as we can outside of even the current thing we're doing. And that's what they started to do. And fast forward, they started building, it started ingraining into their employees' minds the concepts of being an experimenter. And what they did was actually in the early days, they created a room in one of their office buildings that was kind of a makeshift experiment room. They had a whole bunch of random chemicals and they had a wash basin and they had, it was literally a place for the people that worked at 3M to like create experiments. And the way they went about those experiments was, since they still owned the mines, a lot of their customers needed, or they soon realized that the things in the mines, I suppose, I don't remember the story exactly, but I think it was kind of a dud, the land that they bought or whatever. But they had a whole ton of sand. And so they quickly realized, like, well, I wonder if people could use the sand for anything. And they started to experiment and market the sand that they had. And sure enough, there were buyers for sand. One of the buyers ended up using it to make sandpaper. So 3M thought about it like, hey, could we get into the sandpaper business? So they ended up partnering with the original buyer of the sand, and they worked with him in his sandpaper business, and so on and so forth. Every time they worked with a customer, they would ask them the situations they were dealing with. And when that person would bring up a situation, they would immediately go to the experiment room and try to figure out how they can solve it. And that became their motto at 3M, was constant experimentation. And in the book, you'll soon realize like that was the thing that totally revolutionized 3M and made them $1 billion business. And all of their competitors at the time, who were only focused on one thing, again, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but it could be a detriment. They soon passed those folks because of their core purpose. And it was also the reason why 3M has been around for an extremely long period of time, was because of the core focus. So that's the thing about business, right? Is really figuring out why are we in business, and it takes time. There's another book right here. I got it in front of me. A lot of you have probably read it, familiar with it, called Traction, right? One of the things in Traction that they kind of put you through is figuring out what's your core purpose, right? And of course, you go into core values, but the core purpose is really the thing that drives the business long after you're gone, right? Because think about it. If you build a business and the key part is ingraining it in the culture and being obsessed with it, and not just having it written somewhere, but training your employees on the idea of like, what do you stand for, and just building a culture around it. If you build a culture around constant experimentation and you're willing to kind of experiment and grow, well, you know what? You may start off as a mining business, right? But 100 years later, you may find yourself in the Post-it note business because of the core purpose you set, right? And think about it the other way. If you're the founder of the business and your business completely is based off of your personality and who you are, well, when you die, what happens to the business? It's going to be really difficult for somebody to replace you, right? Because they have to be you, right? And that's the difference between a founder that really the business is based off of them and the niche that they're in, versus the business that's based off of a bigger theme, a core purpose, right? The reason that the business is in business, right? The last example is Disney, right? Walt Disney, you should read his biography. Now, I don't want to necessarily talk about these corporations today. Maybe they're not the most ethical or best. I'm not sure. But the idea is Disney's still around, and Disney's been around for a while now, okay? And the reason is Walt had his purpose for being in business was really to create an experience for people, right? Whether it was his motion films to create an experience of like, wow, this is amazing. Or when he created the theme parks, right? Which everyone thought would flop because it didn't really make sense to them, going from motion pictures and movies to a theme park. But in his mind, it wasn't about the mechanism. It wasn't about the thing. It was about the purpose. And his purpose was to create an amazing experience for people, just to wow them, right? And that was his thing. And he ingrained it in his people. He was obsessed with it. It became everything about Disney, which was the purpose of Disney, right? To just create an amazing experience. And so now that Walt Disney's dead and Disney's still going, right? And it's because of that core purpose. And so anyway, I'll stop rambling here. I just thought it was a really powerful thing to realize when you study these old companies, there's so many things you can learn from it. And I think Jim Collins is amazing. I think you should pick up all of his books. He has Good to Great, right? There's a whole bunch over there. I forget the others. But anyway, hopefully this helps. Again, start thinking about what's your reason that you're in business besides the thing you do, right? Building homes, or you're a chiropractor. Like, what's your purpose, right? And I think that will be really, really powerful. So anyway, I'm going to sign off. Hope that helped, and I'll see you in the next video.